I remember the year that my granddaddy died, gonna rise again. Well, they dug his grave on a mountainside, gonna rise again. Well, I was too young to understand the way he felt about the land, but I could read his history in his hands, gonna rise.
I'm Theron Maybin, grew up in the south end of Henderson County, Rock Creek area. Been involved in agriculture all my life, farmed for a living. On my father's side, it goes back to January 1756. And on my mother's side, it goes back to 1761. Both ancestors was Revolutionary soldiers, fought at the Battle of Cowpens in 1781 together. And they grew up in the area around here, or settled in the area here, and a lot of their family are named from one another because of their ties in the service. Matthew Maybin, he fought in 5 different Revolutionary battles, and he would either serve his time or he would volunteer to serve others' time. But whenever he was on up in the years, well, he would walk to Greenville to check on his pension, and he was drawing $80 a year, which is not much money in today's time, but in that day and time, an average of a quarter a day, he could buy 5 acres of land. And there's records where that he bought land from the old Heatherly people for a nickel an acre. And he owned 3 square miles up the Green River Valley. He did mining. There's records of where that he sold lead and silver in Atlanta in the early 1800s. And there's a true mystery. Nobody knows where that he mined it from, but it was in the Green River area. And none of his family knew anything about it, but they all lived close up Green River where he's buried at, and one-room houses, and they kept their livestock right close to the house, where that bears and other things would not bother their stock. They had them right next to the house. And a lot of them didn't marry, but lived close by in separate one-room cabins. And most all of them are buried in the field right where that they used to live. Joe Capps is a descendant in the family that worked in Greenville and walked backwards and forwards to Greenville and made his living in textile in Greenville. And they still have a good portion of land in the family that he actually bought by walking to Greenville and working whenever he's making like $5 to $8 a week. There was about the only thing here that a person could really do then would cut cross ties or pull tan bark and things of that nature. And it was just a much harder way of making a living than it was to walk to Greenville to work in the textile place. My dad grew up on Mountain Valley, and my mother, she grew up on Rock Creek, and there's a mountain in between, and Daddy walked backwards and forwards across the mountain until they married, and then he's settled in the Rock Creek area, where that they raised 10 boys and 4 girls, and all of their families still live in Henderson County, and only one brother has passed away, and the other 11 or other 13 still live in the Green River area, and most of them are very active in church and community affairs and things that help make for a better community. My father, he worked for the different camps, drove a school bus for 38 years, done trading on vehicles and haul garbage and just anything to make a dollar to keep his family fed. Raised 14 kids and never received the first dollar of help through government programs or anything like that to take care of his family. He worked for Camp Windywood, was owned by the Wagners, and he also worked mostly for Camp Greystone. And Mom, she was a stay-home mama that worked day and half of the night preparing and preserving food to feed the family. Never worked a day on public work in her life, but she would always work in the field, and she'd always saw that we had a milk cow, that we had plenty of milk, and she also had extra milk that she sold and made a little money from it, along with butter and eggs and things of that nature. Mama had basically green beans, yellow squash, beets, meat, anything that she could preserve for later. She made sure that it didn't go to waste. She would preserve it. She made a lot of pickle beans, kraut, different pickles, and things of that nature. Oldest brother and myself, it was our responsibility to milk the cows every morning before we went to school. And the two older girls in the family, it was their responsibility to wash the dishes and help Mama with the chores in the house. And they also helped out on laundry days because most of the clothes then was washed where you go to the spring and bring water up and boil it and then wash your clothes on a scrub board. And today it'd be hard to get someone to take time to go carry up enough water to do all the laundry along with do all of the bathing too, and it required a good bit of time and work. Water was spring water, and we also kept milk and butter in the spring. That was our means of refrigeration. It was a spring house, and it had a water box in it that we kept the milk and butter in, and also she kept her kraut and pickle beans and cabbage and things like that needed cooling. They stayed in the spring house to keep it fresher. We had a smokehouse that we had pork in it that was salted down and preserved to do. We also had root cellar where we kept arched potatoes and sweet potatoes and things like that. The house that we lived in was an old house. It was built by some former family members. Had beaded ceiling in it, a fireplace, very open, and very cold in the winter, but Mom always had plenty of quilts and all to keep us warm, and according to some, we survived well. But later, uh, Daddy bought a house in '58, and it had electricity in it, and we thought we'd move to town nearly. Well, the 6-room house, uh, the boys had 2 rooms, and the girls had 1 room, and Mom and Daddy had the other room, and we usually slept 3 and 4 to the bed, and some of the family had married off before the last one was born. Most all of our food came from what was grew on the farm and garden. All of our potatoes, even our cornmeal. Corn was grew, and it was taken to McFadden's mill in town and ground. In the earlier days there, it was ground at the grist mill on Rock Creek. It was water powered. And all of our meat was seasoned by meat that we had grown, and all of the butter that Mama put up, it was used for oatmeal and grits, and she always made a lot of cookies and cakes, and most of it was made from stuff that was right on the place. Now, we never did grow wheat to make flour. We made rye flour that we used a lot, but we always had plenty. Daddy would grow some tobacco, and Mama, she would take and twist it on a rainy day and lay it on the oven door and dry it out, and Daddy loved his homegrown tobacco. Well, we'd take off and go swimming or fishing and things of that nature, or find a grapevine and swing down the side of the hill on it, and we put ourselves together a wagon. It was made out of iron wheels out of the Green River Mill that we would ride downhill, and just different things to entertain ourselves. Cedar Springs Church was established in 1847 by former family members, and they've been 7 generations through the church, and we're still there in the church and still take part in the church. And most of the family is pretty good singers, because Daddy went to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and took music under James Devon and Stamp Baxter. That he learned all of the rudiments and all of that of music, and a lot of the younger ones today have inherited a lot of his knowledge, that they're good singers of time and pitch. Used to, you knew who your neighbor was, what your neighbor was doing, and all things of that nature. But today, they all work different jobs, different places. You see them coming and going, and if they're not involved in church, you don't really know a whole lot about their life. Whereas used to, you pretty well kept up with everything that was going on by meeting in church on Sunday morning and Sunday night. And all conversation took place at church mostly because there was no telephones here. We got telephones in 1958. And whenever we first got telephones, we was on an 8-party line that you had to be respectful and take your turn on the phone and say what you had to say and move on. In the fall of the year, people would come together and have corn shuckings because they took pride in their corn. They would shuck their corn, put it in the crib for their horses and chickens. They always selected out special corn for seed for the next year. Also, the best corn for cornmeal. They also preserved the shuck for the cows, and the cobs were saved for kindling and starting the fires with. A little bit of kerosene on a cob was a good starter for the wood cook stove or just a fire in general. A lot of them would use catnip tea for the babies to have colic and things of that nature. In cold medicine, they used a lot of ginseng, sassafras root, along with whisk and horehound candy for colds. They used a lot of mustard poultices for cold and sinus problems. Rabbit tobacco, it was used for people that had asthma to help them breathe better. Farming is a time thing that you got to know the time to plant and the time that you're going to harvest, the dates of maturing of the different vegetables, that you don't plant to where that everything's going to come in on you at one time to harvest. You learn to space it a lot to where that you or your help can take care of it, and what's in season that people really look forward to. Early spring is fresh green beans, potatoes, squash, and things of that nature, whereas when it comes fall of the year, people are looking more for dried beans, green cabbage, greens, and things of that nature.
Actually, the biggest competition is just a small part of this exhibit. The more popular vegetables dominate the exhibit, with entries divided into over 100 categories. This colorful display gives producers like Theron Maybin from Henderson County a chance to show off their growing talents.
Well, I grow green beans commercially mostly, along with hot pepper, butternut, acorn squash, grow potatoes and a lot of the other oddities for home use and the neighbors.
He's been competing at the fair since 1986, and he brought a bushel of different vegetables this year, including this huge beet.
We planted a pound of them, and we probably got 30 or 40 bushel like that. We just didn't get around to pulling them whenever they needed it, and a lot of them just kept growing and still growing.
Okay,
I didn't bust.
how about 6.220?
6.220. Okay, you're a winner now.
Pretty good size.
There you go. Thank you, sir.
That beet earned a blue ribbon, one of several from Maybin, who knows what the judge is looking for.
My wife and I, we've been going to the state fair in Raleigh since 1986, and always left to try to get the blue ribbon on the largest potato and tomato. And so far, we've succeeded for the last few years on getting them. And we usually get 10 to 15 blue ribbons every year at the state fair. Year before last, we had some very large rutabaga turnips that got on up in the teens. The largest one was 16 pounds, and it fed about 40 people. It even here, and a quarter of it even went to Winston-Salem. It fed a function at a family event down there, and it had a very sweet flavor to it, and a lot of it is because of the cool weather that it grew in. What goes into the rivers and streams usually comes from the fields or the mountains, and it's caused by man not properly taking care of the land as he should, of where that he fills up sprays and things of that nature, and maybe releasing wash water that goes back into the streams that is detrimental to the life in the streams, and just understanding and being a good steward the best you can. It's like the saying, if you don't know where you come from, how do you know where you're going? And if you don't know the importance and the use of the land, you're not going to be as interested in protecting it that if you know that land's there for you for the rest of your life, and not only you, but for generations to come. And that's why, as a good steward, you want to try to leave things better than you found them. It's land is not a throwaway world; it's a protective world. Well, people have much more of a reason to panic whenever the power goes off, that they don't get water. They don't know how to go get water, boil it and purify it. They got water, and there's a shortage of common sense because most parents didn't have common sense to pass on to the generation because they never had to rely on it. They lived in a development or whatnot that everything was bought and paid for. They lived comfortably, but they never did have to depend on common sense to help them make a living. I just hope maybe somewhere, some person along the way receives a comment or whatnot that might help them to be a better steward of the land and their neighbors and things like that. Thank you.
You know he never had a lot, but he worked like the devil for the little he got. Gonna rise again. Well, these apple trees on the mountainside, gonna rise again. He planted the seeds just before he died, gonna rise again. Well, I guess he knew he'd never see the red fruit hanging from